The galaxy had been quiet for a very long time. 800 years of peace stretched across 12,000 worlds like a warm blanket. Nobody remembered war. Nobody needed to. The hegemony of United Stars had made sure of that. Admiral stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the stars drift by. She was 340 years old, her skin marked with the gentle lines of age that her species wore with pride. In all her centuries of service, she had never fired a weapon at another living being. Her fleet existed for ceremonies, for parades, for showing the flag at celebrations. The idea of actual combat seemed as distant as the ancient stories of her ancestors. On the capital world far below, Council Speaker was preparing for another day of peaceful administration. He reviewed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and scientific collaborations. His desk held no military reports because there was nothing military to report. The hegemony had evolved beyond violence. They had built a civilization where conflict was solved with words, where disagreements ended in compromise, where the very concept of war had become a curiosity studied only by historians. This was the way things had always been, as far as anyone alive could remember. This was the way things would always be. Or so they believed. At Outpost 7 Gamma, on the very edge of hegemony space, where the stars grew thin and darkness stretched toward infinity, a young observation officer named was fighting boredom. Her posting was considered the least important in the entire fleet. Nothing ever happened at the Galactic Rim. Nothing ever came from the empty void beyond. Was 23 years old and full of dreams about being transferred somewhere more exciting. She spent most of her shifts reading reports from the inner worlds, imagining the grand festivals and scientific discoveries happening far from her lonely station. The alert changed everything. At first, thought her equipment was broken. Her sensors showed something emerging from beyond the galactic boundary, from the vast emptiness between galaxies where nothing should exist. She ran diagnostics 3 times. The readings remained the same. A vessel, small, maybe 200 meters long, moving at speeds that made no sense for something its size. His hands trembled as she opened a communication channel. Unidentified vessel, this is Hegemony Outpost 7 Gamma. Please identify yourself and state your purpose. Silence, then static, then something that might have been a voice speaking words in a language her translation systems could not recognize. Tried again. Unidentified vessel, we welcome you to Hegemony space. Please respond with your identification codes. The same strange response, the same meaningless sounds. Her computers analyzed the transmission and returned an error she had never seen before. The linguistic structure matched nothing in 800 years of species. This was not just an unknown ship. This was contact with something completely new. His fingers flew across her console, sending an emergency report to Fleet Command. Within hours, Admiral was reading her message with growing concern. What do we know about this vessel? The Admiral asked her staff. The answers were troubling. The ship was constructed of primitive alloys, metals that the hegemony had stopped using thousands of years ago. Its propulsion system operated on principles their best scientists could not identify. It carried no identification codes, responded to no known frequencies, and seemed completely unaware of standard galactic protocols. Perhaps they are simply from an isolated system, one advisor suggested. A species that developed independently and is now reaching out. Admiral considered this. It was possible. The galaxy was vast and the hegemony had not explored every corner. But something about the situation felt wrong. The vessel was not exploring. It was not curious. According to tracking data, it had emerged from beyond the galaxy itself, from the infinite darkness where no species had ever traveled. And it was heading inward, directly inward with purpose. Send a greeting delegation, Admiral ordered. 3 diplomatic vessels, full welcoming protocols. Let us show them the hospitality of the hegemony. The diplomatic ships launched within the day. They were beautiful vessels, painted in the bright colors of peace, carrying gifts and translators and representatives trained in making first contact. They intercepted the unknown ship in an outer system and positioned themselves in a friendly formation. "Welcome, travelers," the lead diplomat broadcast. "We are the hegemony of United Stars. We come in peace and wish to learn about you." The unknown vessel did not slow down. It did not respond. It simply accelerated, pushing past the diplomatic ships as if they did not exist, and continued deeper into hegemony space. The diplomats were confused. This had never happened before. Every species they had ever contacted responded to friendship with friendship. Every new civilization they had discovered was eager to communicate, to trade, to join the great community of the hegemony. Admiral brought the matter to the council. She stood before Speaker and the assembled leaders, presenting her concerns with careful words. "The vessel ignores all contact," she explained. "It does not respond to our greetings. It does not follow our protocols. We do not know what it wants or where it came from. I recommend we prepare a defensive response." Speaker smiled with the confidence of someone who had never known fear. "Admiral, we have enjoyed 800 years of peace. 800 years without conflict, without war, without even a serious disagreement between species. Do you really believe this single small vessel poses a threat to our civilization?" "I believe we should be cautious," replied. "Caution is wisdom," agreed. "But fear is foolishness. We will monitor this vessel. We will continue our attempts at contact, but we will not threaten newcomers with military action. That is not who we are. That is not what the hegemony represents." The council voted with their speaker. The motion for defensive preparation was rejected. The hegemony would remain peaceful, welcoming, open. They would not let one strange ship change who they were. Admiral returned to her flagship with a heavy heart. She ordered her officers to track the vessel continuously, to analyze every signal it produced, to learn everything they could about its construction and purpose. The data they collected only deepened the mystery. The ship was damaged, its hull by impacts and radiation. Its power readings fluctuated strangely, as if its systems were barely functioning. The transmission it broadcast was not a greeting or a warning. It was a loop. The same message, repeating endlessly as if it had been playing for a very long time. Still at her distant outpost was the one who made the next discovery. She had been studying the vessel's trajectory, trying to understand where it was going. The mathematics were simple, but the result made her blood run cold. She contacted Admiral directly, breaking every protocol of rank and procedure. "Admiral," said, her voice shaking, "I know where the ship is heading. I have calculated its course." "Where?" asked. "The capital world, the heart of the hegemony. It is heading directly there, Admiral. No deviation, no exploration, no stops. A straight line to our most important planet." Felt something she had not experienced in centuries. A cold sensation in her chest, a tightening of her muscles. It took her a moment to recognize the feeling. Fear. "How long?" she asked. 6 days, replied. "At its current speed, the vessel will reach the capital world in 6 days." Admiral closed the channel and stood alone on her observation deck. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, beautiful and peaceful, and completely unaware of what was coming. 6 days. In 6 days, something unknown would arrive at the heart of everything the hegemony had built, and nobody knew what it wanted. Nobody knew if it came in peace or in war. Nobody knew anything at all. For the first time in 800 years, the future was uncertain. And deep in the void, still following its programmed course, the damaged vessel continued its journey. Inside, frozen in ancient sleep, a lone figure dreamed of fire and loss and a desperate hope that somewhere, someone might still be alive to help. The galaxy's long peace was about to end. Nobody knew it yet, but the countdown had begun. Captain had served in the hegemony fleet for 60 years. He had escorted diplomats, transported scientists, and carried important guests to grand celebrations. He had never imagined he would be chasing a mystery through the stars. His ship, the Bright Harmony, was one of the fastest vessels in the fleet. It caught up to the unknown vessel in the Velar system, a quiet region of space far from any inhabited worlds, ordered his crew to match the stranger's course and speed, positioning themselves alongside the damaged ship. Begin broadcasting friendship protocols on all frequencies, commanded. Every language we know, every greeting we have. Make sure they understand we mean no harm. Doctor, the ship's language expert, worked at her station with intense focus. She had spent her entire career studying alien languages, learning how different species communicated. But the transmission from this vessel was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The sounds did not match any known pattern. The structure of the language was completely foreign. Captain said after hours of analysis, "I have found something. The transmission is not a greeting, it is a distress call." Turned to face her, a distress call. Yes, and it is old, very old. The signal has been repeating for, I cannot be certain, but possibly hundreds of years. Someone set this message to broadcast and it has been playing ever since. The crew of the Bright Harmony exchanged worried glances. A distress call playing for centuries. A damaged ship crossing the void between galaxies. What tragedy could have caused such a thing? Before anyone could speak further, the unknown vessel did something unexpected. It stopped. After days of constant movement, ignoring all attempts at contact, the ship simply came to a halt in empty space. Sensors ordered, "What is happening?" "The ship's hull is opening, Captain. Something is coming out." They watched on their screens as a small figure emerged from the vessel. It wore a primitive pressure suit, clearly designed for survival rather than comfort. Using small thrusters attached to its body, the figure began crossing the distance between the two ships. "It wants to come aboard," realized. "Medical team to the airlock, security." "No, no security. We will not greet a visitor with weapons." The figure entered the Bright Harmony through the main airlock, and his officers stood waiting, their hearts beating with excitement and nervousness. This was first contact with a completely unknown species. This was history. The stranger removed its helmet. The face beneath was strange and familiar at the same time. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, hair on its head, skin that looked soft and damaged. The creature was clearly suffering. Its movements were slow and painful. Its eyes held a deep exhaustion that seemed to go beyond physical tiredness. "Medical scans," whispered to his team. The results were troubling. The stranger showed massive damage from radiation exposure. Its cells carried the marks of long-term cryogenic suspension. According to the readings, this being had been frozen in sleep for approximately 300 years, slowly traveling through the emptiness between galaxies in a ship that was barely holding together. The stranger looked at the crew of the Bright Harmony. It opened its mouth and spoke. The words meant nothing to the translators, but was working furiously, feeding every sound into her systems, building a translation framework from scratch. Finally, one word came through, just one. "Survivors." The stranger was asking if there were survivors. Survivors of what? What disaster had this creature escaped? What horror had driven it across 300 years of frozen sleep to reach this distant place? Stepped forward slowly, raising his hands in a gesture he hoped looked peaceful. "We want to help you. Can you understand me? We want to help." The stranger stared at him. Its eyes were wet, shining with emotions that could not read. It seemed to be processing his words, trying to understand. Continued working. More words began to translate. Fragments of language pieced together from desperate analysis. The stranger spoke again, and this time more came through. "I searched so long looking for anyone. "Where do you come from?" asked gently. The stranger pointed toward the void, toward the darkness beyond the galaxy, toward nothing. "Home's gone, all gone." The crew stood in shocked silence. An entire species wiped out, a lone survivor traveling for centuries, hopping to find someone who could help. The tragedy of it was almost too much to comprehend. Then the alarm started. The bright Harmony's long-range sensors screamed warnings. Something was approaching, something massive, something coming from the same direction the stranger had traveled. "What is that?" demanded. His sensor officer's voice was barely a whisper. "Ships, Captain, many ships. I am counting hundreds. No, thousands. They are coming from beyond the galaxy, following the same path as the stranger's vessel." The crew rushed to their screens. The images showed a fleet unlike anything the hegemony had ever seen. Massive vessels, twisted and dark, moving in perfect formation. There were so many that they blocked out the stars behind them. Their weapons were already glowing with power. The stranger saw the images on the display screens. Its face changed. The exhaustion was replaced by terror. Pure, absolute terror. It spoke, and this time's translator captured every word. "They followed me, I'm sorry. They followed me home." "Who are they?" asked, his own fear rising. "Who is following you?" The stranger's legs gave out. It collapsed to the deck, its body finally surrendering to centuries of damage and stress. Medical officers rushed forward, but the stranger was fading fast. Its eyes closed. Its breathing became shallow. "We need to get out of here," the sensor officer said urgently. "That fleet is accelerating. They will reach us in hours." Made a quick decision. "Bring the stranger's vessel into our cargo bay. Tractor beams now. We take everything with us." The crew moved fast. The small damaged ship was pulled into the bright Harmony's hold. The stranger was carried to the medical bay, and Captain ordered his ship to flee at maximum speed toward the heart of hegemony space. Behind them, the dark fleet grew larger on their sensors. It was not just following, it was hunting. Sent an emergency transmission to Admiral. His message was brief and desperate. "We have made first contact. One survivor of an unknown species, heavily damaged, 300 years old at minimum. Admiral, there is a fleet coming. Thousands of warships, hostile intent. The survivor says they destroyed his entire civilization. They are now entering our space. We need help. We need everything." On her flagship, Admiral received the message. She read it 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. She had not. 800 years of peace. 800 years of believing that war was a thing of the past, that violence was unnecessary, that the universe was essentially good. All of it was about to be tested. Looked at the star map showing the approaching fleet. So many ships, so much power, and the hegemony's weapons had not been used in battle for centuries. Their soldiers had never faced a real enemy. Their tactics were theories written by historians who had never heard a shot fired in anger. She thought of the stranger, frozen in sleep for 300 years, carrying a desperate hope across the void. Whatever had destroyed his people was now coming for the hegemony. And nobody was ready. In the medical bay of the bright Harmony, the stranger's heart stopped. Medical officer worked frantically, using every technique she knew. The stranger's body was damaged beyond anything she had ever seen. 3 centuries of radiation and cold had taken a terrible toll. But she refused to let him die. This survivor, this messenger, this warning from across the stars deserved better than dying alone on a strange ship. She worked through the night as the bright Harmony raced toward safety, and the dark fleet followed in their wake. And just as the capital world came into sensor range, she achieved the impossible. The stranger's heart began beating again. He opened his eyes and spoke a single word, clear enough for everyone to understand. "Humans." That was what his people were called. Humans. A name never recorded in any hegemony archive. a species that had existed and died and been forgotten by everyone except this one last survivor. And now the things that killed them were coming to kill again. The stranger lay in a medical bed in the most secure facility on the capital world. His body was connected to machines that monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of brain activity. Medical officer had not left his side since they arrived. His name was. He had told them that much before exhaustion pulled him back into sleep. Just a name, just 2 syllables, but it was the first human word the hegemony had ever recorded. Outside the medical facility, the capital world was in chaos. News of the approaching fleet had spread despite the Council's attempts to control information. Citizens who had never known fear were learning what it felt like. Parents held their children closer. Workers abandoned their jobs to stare at the sky. The peace that had lasted 800 years suddenly felt fragile. Admiral stood before the Council, presenting the situation with a calm she did not feel. The fleet numbers approximately 10,000 vessels. They are constructed of materials our sensors cannot fully analyze. Their weapons appear to be already active. At current speed, they will reach our outer colonies in 4 days. Speaker looked older than he had a week ago. The certainty that had defined his leadership was cracking. What do they want? Have they made any demands? Any communication at all? Nothing, replied. They do not respond to our transmissions. They do not acknowledge our presence. They simply advance. Perhaps they do not know we are peaceful, another council member suggested hopefully. Perhaps if we show them we mean no harm. The survivors' people were destroyed by this fleet, said quietly. I do not believe peaceful intentions will save us. The council chamber fell silent. These were leaders who had spent their lives solving problems with negotiation and compromise. They did not know how to face an enemy that would not talk. Made a request she had never imagined making. I need access to the Forbidden Archives. There may be information there that can help us. The Forbidden Archives were exactly what they sounded like. A collection of knowledge deemed too dangerous or disturbing for general access. Records of ancient conflicts, weapons that had been banned, histories of violence that the hegemony preferred to forget. Very few people even knew the archives existed. Speaker hesitated, then nodded. Historian will guide you. She is the keeper of those records. May whatever you find there help us survive what is coming. Was a small woman with sharp eyes and a memory that held centuries of knowledge. She led Admiral deep beneath the capital's surface, through doors that had not been opened in generations, into chambers where dust covered everything and the air smelled of forgotten time. The archives contain many secrets, said as they walked. But I believe I know what you are looking for. 312 years ago, the hegemony made a discovery that was immediately classified. A species on the far side of the galaxy. Young, aggressive, expanding rapidly. They called themselves humans. Felt her heart beat faster. What happened to them? Stopped before a massive database terminal. She entered codes that activated systems dormant for centuries. The screens flickered to life, showing images that made the Admiral gasp. Cities burning, fleets destroyed, entire worlds reduced to glass and ash. The hegemony observed the humans but never made contact, explained. We were waiting for them to mature, to grow beyond their violent tendencies. Then suddenly they went silent. Our scouts investigated and found only ruins. We assumed they had destroyed themselves. Many young species do. We classified the records and tried to forget. But they did not destroy themselves, said softly. No, it seems something destroyed them, something that has now followed their last survivor to our door. The images on the screen changed, had found records of the attacking fleet captured by automated sensors 3 centuries ago. The same twisted ships, the same dark designs, the same overwhelming numbers. We called them the Devourers, said, a name given by those who survived long enough to send final transmissions. The humans fought them, fought hard, But in the end, it was not enough. Study the ancient battle recordings. The humans had been fierce fighters. Their ships were small but fast. Their weapons were crude but effective. They had destroyed many devourer vessels before being overwhelmed. They did not go quietly, she observed. No, agreed. They did not, but they still lost. Admiral returned to the surface with a heavy burden of knowledge. She found General waiting for her, an elderly officer who had spent his career studying ancient warfare. He was considered strange by most of his colleagues, obsessed with conflicts that no longer mattered. Now his expertise was suddenly very relevant. I have reviewed the archives as well, said. The humans developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight the devourers. They created training programs, battle plans, emergency protocols. All of it is recorded in their final transmissions. Can we use it? Asked. His face was grim. The knowledge is there, but our people have not fought a war in 800 years. Our ships are ceremonial. Our soldiers are parade guards. Teaching them to fight in 4 days will be difficult, but not impossible. The old general smiled slightly. Nothing is impossible, Admiral, merely very, very hard. They were interrupted by a message from the medical facility. The survivor was awake. He was asking to speak with whoever was in charge, and rushed to his bedside. The human looked terrible, his body still recovering from 3 centuries of damage, but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. I need to tell you about them, said. About the devourers, about what they did to my people, about what they will do to yours. He spoke for hours. He told them about humanity's first contact with the devourers, about the initial attempts at communication that were met with silence, about the first attacks that came without warning or explanation. They do not negotiate, explained. They do not demand surrender. They do not want territory or resources or tribute. They want consumption. They absorb entire civilizations. They take everything, technology, knowledge, biology. They add it to themselves and move on to the next target. Why? Asked. What purpose does it serve? Shook his head. We never understood. Maybe there is no purpose we can comprehend. They are simply what they are. Hunger given form, destruction without end. He paused, gathering strength for what came next. My people knew we could not defeat them, not alone. So we prepared for the worst. We built weapons designed to hurt them. We developed tactics to slow them down. We created archives of everything we knew, hoping that someday someone would find them and use them to finish what we started. The archives on your ship, said, understanding. Yes, my vessel carries the sum of human military knowledge. 300 years of desperate preparation against an enemy we ultimately could not defeat. It is all I have left to give. Reached out and gripped arm with surprising strength. You have had peace for 800 years. My people had it for 200. We thought we were safe. We thought the universe was kind. We were wrong. The devourers do not care about your peace. They do not care about your culture or your achievements or your dreams. They will come and they will consume and nothing will remain. He met her eyes directly. Do you know how to fight? Thought of her fleet of ceremonial ships, her soldiers who had never seen combat, her civilization that had evolved beyond violence. No, she admitted, we do not. Released her arm and lay back against his pillow. Despite his exhaustion, despite everything he had been through, a small smile crossed his face. Then I will teach you. Whatever time we have, I will use it. The devourers think you are helpless. They expect you to be easy prey. Let me show you how to prove them wrong. Outside the medical facility, the stars were beginning to disappear on the edge of hegemony space. The devourer fleet was blocking out the light, growing closer with every passing hour. 4 days remained. 4 days to transform a civilization of peace into something that could survive what was coming. It was not enough time. Everyone knew it was not enough time. But it was all the time they had. The shipyard had never been so busy. Engineers stood inside the cargo bay of the Bright Harmony, staring at the small vessel that had carried across 300 years of darkness. It looked like a piece of garbage, dented, barely holding together, but appearances could be deceiving. "Open the weapons bay," ordered his team. They found it hidden behind damaged panels, protected by shielding that had somehow survived the long journey. Inside were things the hegemony had never seen. Energy weapons designed not for warning shots or disabling attacks, but for killing. Missiles that carried payloads meant to destroy rather than disable. Armor-piercing projectiles engineered to punch through the strongest defenses. Humans, it seemed, had been a peaceful species, but they had never been naive. Reported his findings to Admiral. They prepared for this. They knew something might come for them someday, and they built weapons to fight it. These designs are 300 years old, but they are more advanced than anything we currently deploy. "Can we reproduce them?" asked. "Given time, yes, but we do not have time. What we can do is study the principles behind them, modify our existing weapons to be more effective. It will not be perfect, but it will be better than what we have now." Across the capital world, similar transformations were taking place. General had taken command of training operations, working from the human military archives stored in ship's computer. The AI that managed those archives was badly damaged, but enough remained to guide them. They called it the remnant, a fragment of human knowledge preserved through centuries of cold and silence, now teaching a new species how to survive. Human tactics emphasized speed and surprise, the remnant explained in its mechanical voice. Against a numerically superior enemy, direct confrontation is suicide. You must strike and retreat, damage and disappear, never allowing the enemy to bring their full force to bear. The hegemony's officers listened with growing unease. These concepts were completely foreign to them. Their entire military doctrine was built on displays of strength, on showing potential enemies that conflict would be costly. They had never imagined actually fighting. Fleet Commander was the first to truly understand. She was young by hegemony standards, only 80 years old, and her mind was flexible enough to accept new ideas. "We have been treating our fleet like a wall," she said during a strategy session. "Standing firm, daring anyone to attack. But against these numbers, a wall will simply be crushed. We need to be water, flowing around the enemy, striking where they are weak, never staying still long enough to be caught." Nodded approvingly. "You understand quickly. The humans learned this through decades of desperate fighting. You must learn it in days." Training began immediately. Pilots who had never flown in combat ran simulation after simulation. Weapons officers who had never fired at a living target practiced targeting and timing. Commanders who had spent their careers managing parade formations learned to coordinate actual battle maneuvers. The results were discouraging. Centuries of peace had changed the hegemony in fundamental ways. Their reflexes were slow. Their instincts were wrong. When faced with simulated attacks, their first response was always to try communication. Even knowing that the enemy would not respond, they could not help themselves. Watched the training from his medical bed, connected to displays that showed him everything. His body was slowly healing, but his mind was fully active. "They hesitate too much," he told during one of her visits. "When the moment comes to fire, they pause, they second-guess. In real combat, that pause will kill them." "They are not killers," replied. "We have evolved beyond that." "Then you will need to evolve back, quickly." His voice was not cruel, merely honest. "The devourers will not hesitate. They will not pause. They will simply destroy. Your people need to match that certainty or they will die." He insisted on leaving his medical bed. Despite subjections, he walked to the training facilities on legs that shook with every step. The officers and soldiers there stared at him. This strange creature from beyond the galaxy. This survivor of extinction. This last human. I am going to teach you something my people learned the hard way, said to the assembled trainees. Peace is a choice. It is something you build, something you maintain, something you protect. But war, he paused, choosing his words carefully. War is instinct. It lives in every species that has ever survived. Your ancestors knew how to fight. You have simply forgotten. He began working with individual commanders, sharing not just tactics but mindset. How to accept that some battles would mean death. How to make split-second decisions without freezing. How to value victory over survival when victory meant saving everyone else. The change was slow but visible. Officers who had trembled at simulated combat began to move with purpose. Soldiers who had hesitated to fire began trusting their training. Something was awakening in the hegemony, something old and buried and necessary. But there was a problem, a serious one. The Devourer fleet increased speed without warning. Long-range scouts reported the acceleration with growing alarm. The enemy would arrive in 2 days, not 4. Half their preparation time had vanished in an instant. Admiral called an emergency meeting of military and civilian leadership. The mood was grim. We are not ready, General admitted. We have made progress, but our forces are still untested against this many enemies. We will be destroyed, Speaker finished quietly. The politician had aged years in the past few days. His certainty about peace, about the fundamental goodness of the universe, had crumbled completely. We will be destroyed, and there is nothing we can do about it. There is one thing, said. Everyone turned to look at the human. He had been standing silently in the corner, conserving his limited strength. I have not told you everything about my ship. There is a reason I survived when my entire species did not. My vessel was an exploration ship, yes, but it was also carrying something else. A weapon, a last resort. He approached the central display and brought up schematics that made the engineers gasp. We called it the Silence, a reality disruption device. When activated, it tears apart the very structure of space in a localized area. Nothing survives, not the enemy, not the user, nothing. You are going to use this against the Devourers? Asked. If I found them again, yes. I was prepared to die to hurt them, to make them pay for what they did. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed the weight of 300 years of grief. But now there may be another way. Engineer stepped forward, his mind already racing. This technology, could it be modified, made more precise? Perhaps, with your resources, with your knowledge of space manipulation, it might be possible to create something targeted, something that affects only Devourer biology, not everything around it. The room erupted in discussion. Scientists debated possibilities. Engineers argued about implementation. Military officers discussed deployment options. For the first time since the crisis began, there was something that looked like hope. But the hope came with a terrible cost. Even modified, explained when the discussions quieted, the weapon must be delivered to the heart of the enemy fleet. It cannot be fired from a distance. Someone must take my ship directly into the center of their formation. A suicide mission, said flatly. Yes, the pilot will not survive. Silence fell over the room. The hegemony had not asked anyone to die for a cause in 800 years. The very concept seemed barbaric, primitive, unthinkable. Looked at the assembled leaders. This is what war requires: sacrifice, loss, the willingness to give everything for those who come after. My people understood this. We hoped you would never have to learn it, but hopes do not win wars. He took a breath. I will pilot the ship. This was always my burden. Let me carry it to the end. The room remained silent. Outside, the stars continued to disappear as the Devourer fleet drew closer. 2 days remained. 2 days to prepare a weapon that might save a civilization. 2 days before the galaxy would learn whether 800 years of peace had made the hegemony weak, or whether the lessons of a dead species could teach them to survive. The countdown continued, and somewhere in the darkness, 10,000 ships of destruction moved ever closer, unaware that their prey had finally found its teeth. The Devourer fleet entered hegemony space on a morning that should have been beautiful. The sun rose over the capital world, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Children walked to their learning centers. Workers began their daily routines. And on the edges of the system, 10,000 ships of destruction emerged from the darkness. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the enemy formation on her tactical display. The Devourer vessels were massive, twisted combinations of metal and something organic. They seemed to pulse with dark life, moving in perfect coordination like the fingers of a single hand. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral. Today we fight for our survival. Today we show the universe that the hegemony is not prey. Remember your training, trust your fellow officers, and know that whatever happens, we face it together. The Battle of the Threshold had begun. The hegemony defense fleet numbered just under 3,000 ships. They were outnumbered more than 3-1. By traditional military thinking, the battle was already lost, but had taught them that numbers were not everything. Begin retreat pattern Alpha, commanded. Instead of charging toward the enemy, the hegemony fleet turned and ran. They fled toward the inner systems, drawing the Devourers after them like hunters chasing prey. The enemy pursued eagerly, confident in their superiority. They had consumed 12 civilizations. They had never lost a war. They expected this species to be as helpless as all the others. Fleet Commander led the fastest ships at the rear of the retreat, keeping just ahead of the Devourer vanguard. Her role was critical. She needed to make the enemy believe they were winning, to keep them chasing, to prevent them from stopping to think. "They are following," she reported. "Formation tight, they smell blood." "Good," replied. "Lead them to the trap." The trap was a dying star in the Velar system, a red giant in its final stages, its gravity well warped by the approaching death throes. Engineer had spent 2 days studying the system, calculating exactly how to use its instability against the enemy. Guided her ships into the gravity well, weaving through the distorted space with skill her trainers would have thought impossible a week ago. The Devourer vanguard followed without hesitation, nearly 3,000 ships pouring into the trap. Now ordered. The hegemony ships scattered in all directions, using every bit of their speed to escape the gravity well. At the same moment, weapons platforms hidden throughout the system opened fire, not at the Devourer ships but at the dying star itself. The calculations had been perfect. The strikes destabilized the star's fragile core. What should have taken centuries happened in seconds. The red giant exploded, sending waves of stellar fire through the gravity well. 3,000 Devourer vessels burned. It was the first significant blow any species had ever landed against the Devourers. For a moment, the enemy fleet stopped advancing. They had never experienced this before. They did not know how to respond. "Press the advantage," urged from his position aboard the flagship. "Do not give them time to adapt." The hegemony fleet struck while the enemy hesitated. Hit-and-run attacks against isolated ship clusters. Coordinated missile barrages targeting communication nodes. Every tactic from the human archives, executed by officers who had learned to fight in days rather than years. The Devourers lost another 1,000 ships before they recovered. Then they adapted, as they always did. They spread their formation, eliminating the possibility of another trap. They began targeting the fastest hegemony vessels first, removing the ability to retreat. "They are learning," General observed grimly. "They absorbed human military knowledge 3 centuries ago. Whatever we could do, they can do better." "Almost everything," corrected. "There is one tactic they never saw because we never used it, because it was created for a last stand that never came." He looked at Admiral. "It is time. The weapon is ready." The modified silence device sat in the cargo hold of ancient ship. Engineer and doctor had worked without sleep to adapt it, combining human destructive technology with hegemony knowledge of space manipulation. The result was something that should have been impossible, a weapon that could tear apart devourer biology while leaving everything else untouched. But it still required a pilot, someone to fly directly into the heart of the enemy fleet and activate the device manually. Walked toward the shuttle that would take him to his ship. His body was still weak, still healing, but his steps were steady. He had been running for 300 years. He was tired of running. Wait. The voice came from speaker. The politician stood at the edge of the landing bay, looking nothing like the confident leader who had dismissed military concerns just a week ago. He looked old, tired, and determined. "You are the last human," said. "Your species' story cannot end here. Your people deserve better than extinction." "Someone must pilot the ship," replied. "Yes, someone must." Walked forward until he stood directly in front of the human. "I have spent my entire life believing in peace, believing that violence was unnecessary, believing that good intentions would protect us from harm. I was wrong. I was foolish, and my foolishness may have cost millions of lives." He placed his hand on shoulder. "Let me make it right. Let me remember what my species has forgotten. Let me show my people that sacrifice is not a burden, it is an honor." Studied the old politician's face. He saw no fear there, only acceptance. "You understand what this means," said. "I understand," smiled slightly. "I am old. My best years are behind me. But you have so much to offer. Teach my people what you know. Help them remember how to survive. And when the histories are written, make sure they know that the hegemony did not go quietly into the night." There was no more discussion. Boarded the shuttle. Watched from the landing bay as the small craft carried the speaker toward the ancient human vessel. The final phase of the battle began. The hegemony fleet created an opening in the Devourer formation, sacrificing ships to draw the enemy's attention. Through that opening, a single small vessel flew at maximum speed toward the heart of the hostile fleet. Speaker sat in the pilot's seat, surrounded by technology 300 years old. The weapon hummed beneath his feet, ready to fulfill its purpose. Around him, 10,000 enemy ships closed in, finally recognizing the threat. He thought about his life, about the peace he had helped maintain, about the people he was about to save, and he realized that he had never been more certain of anything. "For the hegemony," he whispered, "for the humans who came before, for everyone who will come after." He activated the weapon. Reality tore itself apart. A wave of destruction spread outward from the small vessel, passing harmlessly through hegemony ships but shredding every devourer it touched. The organic components of the enemy vessels screamed, a sound that echoed across every frequency. Ship after ship collapsed, the twisted life within them dying instantly. Speaker died with his hand on the activation switch. He never saw the final result. But Admiral did. She watched on her displays as the Devourer fleet crumbled. 8,000 ships destroyed in seconds. The remaining 2,000 scattered, fleeing in all directions, their coordination broken, their confidence shattered. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers had lost. The surviving enemy ships disappeared into the void, running from a galaxy that had finally found the strength to fight back. The hegemony fleet did not pursue. They were too exhausted, too damaged, too shocked by what they had experienced. But they had survived. Against all odds, against an enemy that had destroyed 12 civilizations, the hegemony had survived. 1 year later, the capital world held a dedication ceremony. A new military academy had been constructed, designed to ensure that the lessons of the battle would never be forgotten. At its entrance stood a statue of two figures. Speaker, holding the controls of a ship, his face peaceful, and beside him, the last human, his hand reaching toward the stars. Admiral stood before the gathered crowd and spoke. For 800 years, we thought peace meant forgetting war. We believed that if we refused to fight, violence would simply disappear. The humans taught us the truth. Peace is not the absence of weapons. Peace is the strength to make weapons unnecessary. We will remember that lesson. We will teach it to our children, and we will never again mistake blindness for virtue. Listened from the audience. He wore hegemony citizenship insignia on his chest, the first ever awarded to a human. When they had offered him resources, wealth, anything he wanted, he had asked for only one thing: help searching the galaxy for other human survivors. The search had already begun. Deep space probes were scanning the void beyond the galactic rim. Messages were being broadcast in human languages, hoping someone might answer. The chances were small. After 300 years after such complete destruction, the odds of finding another survivor were almost zero. But almost zero was not zero. Had spent 3 centuries running. Now he had a place to stand, a people who had adopted him, a purpose beyond mere survival, and a hope that somewhere in the vast darkness of the universe he was not truly alone. The ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed, walked to the base of the statue and looked up at the carved image of. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You gave my people's death meaning. You showed your people that the universe is not kind, but that they can be strong enough to survive it anyway. Wherever you are now, I hope you know, we will not waste what you gave us." He turned and walked toward the academy entrance, where a new generation of students waited to learn from the last human. The galaxy had changed forever. The long peace was over, but something better had taken its place. A peace built on strength, a peace built on sacrifice, a peace built on the memory of those who had given everything so that others might survive. The stars continued their eternal dance overhead, and somewhere in the darkness knew the universe was watching. It would not find the hegemony helpless again.